So good evening, everyone. Now we're starting our session. It's the last session from the TP presentations over the SSP-23 program. RTP, it's avoiding space collision, space debris. I thought it would be the name better for the presentation for today. And I would like to invite Eric Dahlstrom, who's the chair of RTP, to provide an explanation of the general topics that are being discussed in the TP, also how we organized. And at the end, we also invited two of our participants to also provide the updates of how they are developing their reports. So thank you, Eric.
Can you hear that? Hello? Okay, that's it. Thank you. Yes, thank you for inviting us. So I'll be presenting the first part of this, and then we'll have Carlos tell some about the details of how we structured the team project. So this is some of the areas that we'll be talking about. First is the challenge of space situational awareness and space traffic management, because low Earth orbit is getting very crowded. Then we'll talk about how we designed the team project, and then invite the team project participants to talk about some of the current status of their project. Note that the final presentation will be coming up on Thursday, the 24th of August at 1 p.m. at MP, or live streamed online there. So this basic challenge is the potential for fragments of objects in Earth orbit to collide with active satellites. And it creates more debris, which then contributes to colliding with other satellites. And so it's these plots of objects that are already up there are pretty frightening, but it's actually all the large objects that are tracked and orbits calculated. They're actually very tiny, so the probability of one colliding with another is so far still small. But we have to, for active satellites, we have to steer them to avoid collisions and avoid creating even more debris. So space situational awareness is basically being aware of the satellites, the debris and satellites in Earth orbit, as well as things like space weather and the effects on the atmosphere of the Earth. And then we have collision avoidance is just changing your orbit when you're getting a warning that you have a potential collision. So here's an example of why things are different in the last few years. We now have more than 4,500 Starlink satellites, for example. And we, as you can see from this plot, you can see that from the history of the origins of the space, of launching things into space, things have gone on fairly steadily, but only in the last few years we've had enormous number of satellites launched. Starlink is one constellation. There are other mega constellations. You can see that the collision avoidance alerts have increased to up to 45,000 in the last 3 years. So that, during this presentation, there's going to be a couple, 2 or 3 alerts somewhere in the world for satellites to move to avoid a potential collision. And so here's another example of satellite constellation of OneWeb, which is up at higher altitude at 1,200 kilometers. This is a plot in altitude from very low altitude down here up to 1,200. Here's the OneWeb constellation, and then here's the Starlink constellation in dark blue. And the other plot here is all the tracked debris objects. And so you can see it sort of peaks around 800 kilometer altitude. The space station and International Space Station and the Chinese space station are down here in a sort of safer orbit. If you have orbits below about 500 kilometers altitude, the upper atmosphere brings the debris down fairly quickly, but things that around 800 kilometers stay up there for a long, long time. And so this is a very crowded orbit, and and that's why people are choosing different satellite constellations, large constellations of satellites, to be placed in other orbits, trying to avoid this concentration of debris. This is one of our guest lectures was from Leo Labs and gave this presentation. And so they have their own set of radars around the world that track these objects. Then besides the tracked objects, which are like larger than 10 centimeters across, you also have a background of very tiny objects that run into surfaces. And there's the space station has a number of shields around the modules to prevent penetration from these objects. You can see one knocked a hole in the Canadian robot arm, and then this is a panel that was removed and then brought back from the Hubble Space Telescope. And although these holes are actually exaggerated because they were drilled in for samples, but you can see that over 15 years, how many tiny objects had hit the Hubble telescope. So it's very difficult to avoid this background of very tiny objects. And I worry every time an astronaut goes out on a spacesuit, because you could actually have an astronaut, hurt by getting hit by a small object. These things are going 10 times faster than a bullet, so it can be very damaging. In the long term, there's an idea of removing some of the big space debris objects, and there's early experiments of grabbing and throwing nets and basically grabbing and then bringing into reentry, burning up on reentry. Luckily, it's a fairly clean burning up on reentry at thousands of degrees, so but it takes effort to go up and grab an object and bring it down, and so it's only a few nations that have gotten together and put a bounty on, if you can bring an object down, they will pay you. Otherwise, no one has figured out the business case for spending $100 million to chase down a piece of junk. So it's a tricky problem. So this is a plot of all the tracked objects, including debris down here and active satellites. And you can see a few reasons why debris increases. Like you can have sometimes the object has leftover propellant, or the batteries cause an explosion. And sometimes there's a collision. For example, Iridium and the Cosmos satellite collided and created a bunch of debris. There's been several anti-satellite tests which have created large clouds of debris. And so there are several nations that have the ability for anti-satellite tests. This was the plot from 10 years ago. And if you continue it on, you can see it's continued to grow, partly because of some debris causing events, but also the large increase in the number of active satellites. And so this is a picture of the active satellites in green and the debris objects in red and gray, and this happens to be timed to the time of this presentation. So it's sped up, but it's a pretty accurate model of what objects are overhead right now. And it looks like, it looks very frightening, but if you picture that, several hundred objects over Brazil at one time, if you just picture a few hundred cars in Brazil, how often would they run into each other? So it looks worse than it is, but it's still something that we have to be very careful about. You can see the Starlink satellites climbing from their launch orbit at 300 kilometers, climbing up to 500 kilometers in a line. So we started this project with the Space Days program for design the team project. We offered this challenge for the participants to look at developing a framework that where you're supporting this effort to coordinate space traffic and with automated updating of the catalog, automatic collision avoidance, providing conjunction assessments, which is when objects come together, suggesting maneuver plans. There's lots of policy and legal aspects because this is very international. The different constellations are under jurisdiction of different countries. And what's interesting also recently is that there's not only are the governments involved, but there are actually private companies that are doing a lot of work in the making advances in the technology and improving the design of the capabilities. So we have we presented a lot of topics about the details, like a collision probability event comes out with, because of the uncertainty in the positions, it's overlapping ovals and the question is, can you tighten up these uncertainties so that you know whether or not you're passing by safely or if you're actually risking collision? This is one of those Lea Labs commercial radars. And so we have a lot of issues offered to the participants to look at. And this happens to be it's a really ideal place to host this event because we have such expertise at ITA and IMPE and good cooperation from experts being available, as well as some of the participants are from ITA and IMPE. We have not only a knowledge about satellite design and satellite operation and space weather expertise. This is during the 9-week program, the participants are spending most of their time in core lectures or department activities, and you can see the team project time gradually builds up, and now we're in the concentrated team project time, and here we are getting close to the end. And so during the other early phases, we were visiting experts and lots of Zoom calls, and at this point, I'd like to invite Carlos Amaral to come up and say something about how, because Carlos played such a big role in designing the lectures for the that we had for the experts that were invited.
All right, thank you, Eric. So, as Eric mentioned, the SSP lasts for 9 weeks. In the last 3 weeks, they are fully dedicated to the development of the team project. But actually, in the first 6 weeks, they had 1 or 2 sessions a week dedicated to the TP. In those sessions, they are expected, it's a group of 25 participants. They are expected to organize themselves and organize them as a group, establish objectives, get to know more about the subject. And also, during these sessions, we invited some guest lecturers, as STM is such a multidisciplinary topic. We had some guest lecturers to explore those other aspects related to STM. So we had Dr. Tanya for our first session. She explored the legal and policy aspects of STM. In our second session, we had Dr. Roberto Galski from INPE. So the participants got the opportunity to go to INPE satellite control room, and they had some knowledge about the activities that the flight dynamics team and the Space Debris Operation Office, how do they conduct conjunction assessments and their orbital maneuvers at INPE. Then our third session, we had Dr. Joaquin, also from INPE, exploring how space weather is related to STM activities. We had Dr. Antonio Bertacchini providing an overview of orbital mechanics and orbital maneuvers, how orbital parameters are communicated between satellite operators also. Then, as Eric mentioned, we have participation also from Darren McKnight from the LEO Labs, providing some perspectives on the commercial side and sensor management, how LEO Labs is developing their activities in support for STM. We had Dr. David Murakami from NASA Ames exploring a civil space traffic management framework. And then also in our last session, we had a workshop on orbital maneuvers. It took all the morning. We had again Dr. Bertacchini providing insights into the main types of orbital maneuvers and how they affect the orbital parameters. We had also some satellite operators from the Brazilian Space Operations Center located in Brasilia from the Air Force, providing some insights on the geosatellites operations, how do they provide orbital maneuvers and station keeping with geosatellites. And then we had an activity provided from an engineer from Anacon and AGI, assessing using the advanced CAP tool and STK. So it's something worth to mention also that Anacon and AGI, they provided licenses to all participants, 1 month of access in STK for those who had the interest also to get to know more about the tool. And then we have also 2 additional lectures, one from Dr. Hoda Craig. He's the head of ESA Space Debris Office, and he provided lots of insights of this STM current state and future perspectives. And also we had Heather Bungard providing some insights into the commercial perspective of STM in the context of one of the main stakeholders we have in this scenario, that are the main mega constellations providers. Well, so that's it. Thank you, Eric. Now I give you the word.
Yeah. And at this point, I'd like to invite the participants, 2 participants up here, Elena Ancona and Enrique Damata.
Yeah, hi everyone. So this is to present actually the team we've been working on for the last few weeks. As you can see, there's a variety of age, gender, country. So it's a very delightful international environment, and these are the countries that all the participants are from, which gives us an incredible opportunity to use this in our team project, being the issue that we are trying to solve, kind of international in any sense, because there's no boundaries in space. So the space situational awareness and space traffic management needs to be faced from a broad perspective. So we are trying to use this as a strength, and making sure that we bring in all the knowledge from all the countries that we come from. One of the interesting things that we had to do was we were left very free of organizing ourselves during the project. So we had a few discussions at the beginning where we were trying to make sure our goals and objectives were clear, and we could make use of all the different backgrounds of the people that were actually part of the team, because we have students that have just finished university or that are still completing their masters, as well as professionals that have been working for 15 years in the field. So we wanted to make sure that everyone could feel that their contribution was valuable and that they could bring in a different perspective. But the important part was as well trying to divide the work that needed to be done. And we assessed that the major needs were having some teams specializing on different aspects of the issue, which is quite broad if you try to tackle it all together. So we have a big group that was focusing on the science, technological, and engineering aspect of the issue. Some people that were focusing on policy and law, and then on the business and economic perspective, and also like a core group of project managers that would then make sure that the whole project was kind of following. And on top of this, many people had to take on also other roles, like having to prepare some graphs to make sure our final product is enjoyable for the public, and some editors for our final report. And I'll hand over to Damata for some status of the project.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, everybody. So my name is Henrique Damata. I'm Brazilian. I'm former graduated and master's degree on ITA. And it's been an honor to be part of this SSP program. And I'm here to show you the current status of our team project, okay? So, after analyzing everything that Eric said to us, we have a very broad concept of what SSA is. And so how are we managing to deal with that? So we have to focus our attention on a more specific question. And then we declare this mission statement that our team is supposed to analyze the global state of the art of space situation awareness, verifying the strengths, the gaps, and possibility for improvement in order to propose a more efficient and effective framework for on-orbit collision avoidance support service composed of technical and programmatic actions based on international collaboration to guarantee the sustainable use of space. So this is a big mission statement, and we derive all our work from these, each word that is here, okay? So defining the scope was one of the main issues that we had to deal on the beginning of our work. And I here only will show you some of the points that we are covering, right? So the analysis of the current state of art, the global actors, and business opportunity. So with this structure that we defined in our group, we have these business opportunities, we have this policy and law, and we have the new science that emerged on the last couple of years. So we have to understand the policy, legal aspects, and the international collaboration. This is a very good and important word for our current project, okay? And then we have to propose a framework for on-orbit collision avoidance support service. So with this framework, we will utilize all the technical capabilities that we have, all the business opportunities that emerged on the last years to address the political, the policy and laws challenges that we face in order to provide to have a proposal of an international framework that can really work, can really be implemented, and then we hope that our team can, with this international nature that our team has, to propose something that is impactful on the world, okay? So this is the framework that we came up, this International Space Traffic Management Framework that has national regulation bodies. Each nation will provide their policies and laws that will have compliant STM service providers that will work like on with airplanes. We have these local air traffic controls. We'll have here space traffic management services, service providers that will work with the operator to provide and give the opportunity for all the operators from all different countries to share their best knowledge of their spacecraft, not only position, conjunctions, future maneuvers. Everybody can feed a system, a software that will provide a conjunction assessment and supply this information for all the players that's been part of our framework. So this is a really rough overview of our work that is being done. And with this information that is being shared among the operators, we really hope to all these ellipsoids of probability to be smaller and smaller, so we can assure that every time two satellites are crossing each other, it's safe enough, or we can provide a message really quick and on time, so the satellites can really perform the maneuver. So with these outline, this framework, we really think that after implemented, it can provide a big impact on the satellite operations. Eric?
I think we can all join.
So I believe we'll go to question and answers.
Yes, we'll all gather for to answer questions, and I think we can also you can advance one more to and we can get. So. So, do we have any questions? Do you have any questions for each other?
I'd like also to thank the presence of Dr. Evandro, who together participated. He works together with Dr. Bertacchini and helped us in lots of activities here. Thank you, Doctor.
I'd like to ask the participants about how you're using the fact that you're coming from so many different countries. And because I've seen studies in the US where it's very US focused, but I think we have an opportunity with this group to really broaden the perspective.
Yeah, I think that is a fair, good point. Normally, we are very US and Europe centric when we start discussing those topics, right? And having people coming from different countries and with a completely different background was really helpful at the beginning of the conversations, when we were a bit biased on the kind of information we had. We were giving for granted some, we were assuming that some things that were actually not true. So having people from China, from other countries, from Brazil, also helped to change our perspective and go back to try and be a bit more global in those consideration. And I think D'Amato can add something.
Yes, I can add that on the map, you can see that we have participants from many countries in the world. And when you compare these countries with the current countries that have controlling the biggest number of satellites, you can see that they matches. So we really have not only a very international, but very representative group that can represent their countries and what is going on space. And we are seeing it really in practice when, as Elena was commenting, when we are discussing some points and we really miss some opportunities, and then when the international comes and they bring this new information and we can improve our proposal, our space traffic framework proposal.
Also, sometimes it can seem trivial, but sometimes the language barrier was one of the main reasons why maybe we couldn't find that information. Maybe because it was only available in the language in which that information is used. Right? We are so used to look for information on Google in English, and so some things might not even show up there. And then we have people in the team that are like, wait a minute, there's also this other piece of information that you guys were missing. So that was, I think, a unique opportunity because I wouldn't see any other context where you could engage so many people from different backgrounds and say, hey, let's work together on such a delicate topic.
Carlos, would you like to invite the audience if they have any questions in Portuguese?
Yes. Wagner, do you have some questions?
We have one here.
Alguém da audiência?
Olá, meu nome é Pedro Ricotto, tenho 10 anos. Sobre framework, eu queria entender quanto tempo vocês estipulam que vai demorar para fazer o software, quando que ele vai ficar forte ou robusto para ter respostas de qualidade e quanto vocês estipulam o preço?
Okay, now, answer in English or in Portuguese. Both. Okay, he's a very good question. Uma ótima pergunta. We were discussing these on these last couple of days. We have the framework, so how to implement this framework, the timeline to implement the framework, and how much it costs. Okay, so do you understand when I'm speaking in English? More or less, okay. Our framework we are proposing, and we hope that nations, universities, companies could will see the potential for a better and more safe traffic, and then they can pick it up and implement it. So we are not implementing this framework. We're proposing the answer. We're giving you the final answer. So we propose this is a proposal that can work. And then we hope that other players will come up and will implement it and we'll see through all the business plan and see how much it will cost, etc. But we have some timelines. So which technology we should implement first, and then the other technology, and then the other. But I would say that all technologies we already have. It's based on blockchain, it's based on cryptographies. So there is nothing very new. It's only a matter to every player to understand and agree to play on these same rules. And this is that's why we have this policy and law team, because this is the main challenge. It's not technology, it's not even money. It's for them to agree with each other.
I just want to add something. That is a very interesting question, because from a business perspective, there are already many companies that are providing services such like Leo Labs or many other startups that are planning to provide this sort of service. And one example that we could give is during one of the lectures that we had someone from Amazon, AWS. They also have their own software, which is called Project Argus, which will be one of the many that you have available. And he was sharing with us with this piece of information, which was very interesting. He said when they gather all the experts and from a technical perspective, and they asked them to provide a software with the capabilities that they were looking for, it took 15 days, something like that. So less than a month. They were just gathering all the people saying, hey, we need to perform this and this and this other activity, and go work and come back with a piece of software or some product. And it took 2 weeks basically to do that. So there are some challenges that we still have, like we cannot track pieces of debris that are smaller than a certain dimension. We are making progress on many other aspects on the technological side, but the technological aspect in this challenge is, I would say, the less concerning one. The most important issue here is to have all the countries and all the political parties involved to actually be willing to do something together, to trust each other, because there's also military involved. So that is the biggest concern to address. Yeah.
Acho que eu adicionaria também, que é bem interessante na proposta deles, é de que não é algo disruptivo, né? Eles aproveitam grande parte da infraestrutura que já é utilizada pelas empresas ou diferentes entidades, né? Então, na verdade, o que eles estão propondo é uma maneira eficiente dessa comunicação fluir entre os diferentes players, né? Então, hoje em dia você já tem diversos sistemas que estão operando e não se comunicam de uma forma eficiente. Então, o framework que eles estão propondo, ele já aproveita esse framework que existe e faz essa comunicação se tornar um pouco mais ágil, né? Então, com isso, um custo de investimento para implementação, ele fica mais reduzido também.
And just to point out that any kind of automated system would be a big improvement over the sort of manual communication and coordination that happens now with people emailing each other and doing phone calls and deciding whose satellite will move and things like that. If you can just imagine what air traffic would be like if every airplane had to call each other to say how you were going to fly, it would be a nightmare. But there's no central authority over space traffic, and countries don't want to give central authority power over their traffic.
Yeah. Hi guys, I'm Priscila Matos. I work at INPE and I'm a SSP alumni. I participated in SSP 12 a long time ago in Melbourne, Florida, and the TP that I was part was space debris. And I'd like to know, since 2012, if is there any big evolution regarding the space debris aspect, and if it's possible to have something more concrete for a near future. Is it a part of the job that the task that were gave to you or not? Thank you.
Okay, so yes, we actually have the previous SSP team projects as reference on our work. Since we are not addressing space debris itself, we only mention and we discussed a little bit, but we not try to solve the space debris problem, since it's more related to like space environment and how to deal with that. So it will go more for active space debris removal or space mitigation guidelines. So we address, but our framework doesn't go deep on that. So during our research, or during the lectures, what can I say? Everything I believe is not getting better. Okay, we don't have like the technologies that were proposed back then that we would have in 10 years, active debris removal. We still don't have them. It's still very expensive. I don't know if it will become. It's becoming more and more necessary. So we have some altitudes that if we just left as it is, it will become a Kessler syndrome. It will be unable to use some altitudes if we don't remove them, the debris. They will start to colliding with each other, and we will lose that part of space. So we are already facing these problems, but I don't see if someone can add.
Yeah, there's just a few things that are, we have the UN guideline for low Earth orbit for satellites to be removed within 25 years. And then last year, the US decided to change for U.S. satellites to change it to 5 years, and so there's more of a desire to remove objects from low Earth orbit, and that means that we're moving towards a point where every satellite in low Earth orbit has to have some ability to remove itself, so that's where. And the other aspect that we still have a problem of a lot of fuel being left in upper stages, and then it just explodes and over time. And so there are all these recommendations and guidelines for removing outgassing the excess propellant and removing the energy from batteries and things. But that is not. It's only like 80% of the satellites that are doing that properly, and so we have to work harder on that, or else the debris will continue growing.
If I can add something, so when we started working on the project, the title of our team project was Space Situational Awareness, and that includes so many different topics and areas that you could actually be focusing on. Now, space debris is for sure one of them, and someone could say maybe the most concerning one, and the one for which we feel more responsibility as well, because it's something that we did cause. But at the same time, from the year that you mentioned, I think there's been a lot of progress. Like right now, everybody at least knows that we need to consider space sustainability, that there are some guidelines that you cannot go there and do whatever you want. When countries go and perform their anti-satellite tests, there is a reaction from everyone, basically. So we felt that right now our contribution as a team in this limited time frame on the issue of space debris would have been not particularly useful, because guidelines are there, technologies are being developed, and like we have a sort of understanding of where we should aim in the future. Whereas what we found missing, the big gap that we found in like the current situation is we have constellations that are growing so fast, and like from here to 3 years' time, the situation will be completely different, and we felt the urgency to tackle this issue now, trying to imagine a situation where there are not only two parties, like OneWeb and Starlink, having to interact with each other, but there are maybe 10, and situations where there's not only one entity providing a conjunction data message, so one of those alerts that says, hey, your satellite is going to crash with this other guy's satellite, you need to do something. What if you get, with all these startups and companies, you have 4 different messages that are telling you different things. Like one is telling you you're going to collide, and the other one is telling maybe you're going to collide, and the other one is telling no, you're not going to collide. What do you do? How do you start talking to the other, operator? Can we do like phone calls and emails when there are 10 constellations, when each one is maybe in a different phase of their mission? There are some that are already providing service, some that are getting to their final orbit. So the situation will become much more complex than it is already right now. And we felt the need to focus on kind of taking a minute and saying, okay, what do we want to do? Because at the end of the day, every company is thinking from their perspective, yeah, we do this constellation and we take advantage of what we can right now. So no one is actually taking the time to figure how the future is going to be for everybody to be able to do their business in a safe way.
I also agree with Elena that the awareness into the topic is getting improved. One example of that is, for example, the zero debris approach from ESAs. Yes, that you have to make a control re-entry. For example, if you're operating low orbit, and if not, probably it's where they enter the deorbiting active removal services, right? And also one aspect that I think it's going to be, for example, why STM systems is going to be necessary more and more in autonomous system, right? Because actually for SSA systems, we also expect better capacity to map the smaller debris, for example. So today we have an approach, a statistical approach, that we estimate a larger population of smaller debris than 10 centimeters. So as soon as you have the capacity to map those smaller debris, we're getting an amount of alarms of collision, for example, that will increase dramatically. So in this sense, it's really needed to have an autonomous STM system.
And talking about law and policies, how was to you guys to work with this subject with people from different backgrounds, different origins, and so on? Because for us at that time it was really tricky. Sometimes we have an idea that, oh, this subject will generate a lot of arguing, discussion, and it doesn't happen. And the other subject that we thought that, no, this is going to be very easy or very complicated. And sometimes it was difficult for us to figure out what was difficult for the group and what was not regarding of space law and policy. Can you tell us a little bit about the discussions that you have during this job?
Yes, so we have a dedicated group for policy and law that was composed by the main actors. Like we have Europeans, Americans, Chinese. We have all of them working together. Their group that didn't occur any concern because we really wanted to understand first each country's point of view before we start like proposing stuff that could like be misinterpreted. So the team, I believe they did a good job. They received all the inputs, and then when we were about to propose, to finalize the framework, we understood that we could not like have a centralized organization that would take care of the whole system. Because if we do that, where these systems will be allocated in US, in Europe, and Russia. Wow, how we will manage that? So we came up with the idea to use technology to spread between all those players. So everyone is doing this analysis, share the analysis, and sharing data through an automatic system that is not biased by any of the players. So we try to define a zone, a DMZ, a place where everybody has the control, and so nobody has the control of what is happening there because it's automated, it's a software, so everybody can trust. So that's it. That is how we, and then when we propose this framework, I believe each individual of our team members were, okay, I believe it's good. And see, we have some people that were really connected with their countries, like the Indian, they really defended the Indian point of view. The Chinese really defended the Chinese point of view. But when we came up with this idea of this decentralize it and understand that we not like impose that, no, because since most of the sensors are located on, let's say, on Europe, so the Europe will be the one that will centralize all the space traffic management. No, we really let it open, and we came up with this idea of a more decentralized system, and it worked. Everybody agreed.
Yeah, and I completely get your point. We had some discussions where maybe the engineering team was gathering together. They were, coming up with a beautiful graph that would make a lot of sense. And then they were going, with a happy face to the policy and legal, and they were like, no, this is never going to work. And so, yeah, that was the trickiest part. And we had a discussion at a point where we were saying, like, how should we proceed from here? Like, do we want to let this project be in an ideal world where everybody, is happy and cooperative? This is the best engineering solution that you could have, but we don't live there. So we need to, be realistic and come up with a solution that is maybe less efficient, but at least it works and it helps to alleviate the issue a bit. So this was one thing that we were, I would say, good at the beginning to realize that we needed a policy and legal team. And because otherwise we would have risked to, we have many engineers in the team. So one of the risks was that we would have 20 people working on the engineering side and then maybe 1 or 2 on the policies. And we were very clear at the beginning. We said, no, we need we need a team actually working on those issues because those are the main blockers in the current situation. So that helped. And another thing that we came up with was trying to create a questionnaire for experts and key players in the field. And we are planning to use these as a very relevant kind of feedback to see what people actually think, and those people are the ones actually working in operations or in the military, on the government or space agencies. So we are interested in getting the information from them, and we had some very interesting insights. Like, everybody agrees that we need a space traffic management system, and then when you ask the question, would you trust a commercial entity to take care of that, the answer is no. So there are many points where you can clearly get the audience to tell you actually what they want and what they would be happy with, and that is going to be, I believe, a very valuable thing for the credibility of what we are going to suggest at the end.
Elena, I wonder if you could just add the remarkable response in the short amount of time for your questionnaire that you sent out.
Yeah, so we sent out this questionnaire yesterday in the afternoon, and we already got more than 45 responses, like in less than 24 hours.
From around the world, yes.
Yeah. So we are really impressed, and this gave us the acknowledgements that actually, like, people are really interested in the subject and people want this issue to be addressed. It's just that there's no one leading the effort. So maybe our work will help somehow starting to be on the right path.
Hello. My name is Wagner. I work at Cypher. I work with debris and satellites, operational satellites. A question: your team have many players, and you said your framework have many sensors in many countries. Is a beautiful scenario, okay? Because the accurate information about the position of the satellite. So, how your framework continue operational and provide service in war condition, in war condition of in countries.
So I guess the question is maybe if there are more sensors that are giving you different accuracy and different
your framework.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the business model that resonate more with what we were trying to do is the one that Red from Space DAO Parameter AI was presenting during one of the lectures, and the idea is the following: that first of all of these companies having sensors and providing this service, they would need to have clear in their mind that they need to, make sure that they are selling, accurate data, and they are very clear on what are their sensitivities and what they can and they cannot do, so that it is clear from my perspective, if I am an operator, that I can trust you with this level of accuracy and in this scenario, and I maybe can trust you better than another SCM provider in one of the situations, but maybe not in the other. So like having a clear understanding of what those sensors are capable of and what are their strengths and weaknesses. And the other point is what Space DAO is actually suggesting is having, like, gathering all those information all together. So suppose you have a conjunction tomorrow at 2 between your satellite and a piece of debris. And you have a CDM, a conjunction data message that is coming from 5 different providers, and they are telling you all different things. What you would do is you would gather all of the 5, and you would assess, like, according to 3 out of 5, your probability of collision is higher than 10 to the minus 4. According to only 1, your miss distance is going to be less than 500 meters, and so on. And then the operator would be able to make a more conscious decision on, like, whether to maneuver or not, depending on what information they trust more, and like if there's a 90% cases that are saying that the conjunction is actually a risky one, then they might want to move more than if it was just one of the sensors that was indicating that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, but I believe the main concern is that the sensors is not our sensors. So this is a framework where, like, providers enters, and you have, like, as I said, the main point here is not the infrastructure or the technology, is the connections, the communications, who answers to whom, and protocols, this kind of stuff. So we will, on this framework, we have several SSA providers, each provider with their the number of sensors, and they are providing. If someone is, like, out of business because of a war, that's your question, there will be other providers and so on, because on this framework, all the providers will, okay, to be competitive on this market runs like this, and I can open my own company with my own sensor. It can be a small sensor to provide, like, one information a month. And if you have a business model, that's okay. You will also have the American sensors, the US Space Force sensors. You also have ULab sensors. You have many different SSA providers, and a solution as SpaceDAO that Elena was mentioning will help this system. It's a proposal. Yeah, it can be used like SpaceDAO or other solution to how to work with that huge amount of information from so many different SSA providers.
And also, in addition to those answers, they will be certified SSA data providers. So you must have to qualify the quality and make sure that your data follow the standards for the system. And also, one of the concerns when they propose the system is actually to make it to use legacy systems and to make it profitable for companies to want to operate. So, for example, the SSA suppliers that they might give that information and contribute for the system and make it profitable, right?
Part of the description of the concept is that the active satellites, which the operators know the position of very accurately, that they would be able to share that data into the system, but not have the other operators know the specific precise knowledge of their orbits, but actually just have the system automatically check to see if there was a conflict and collision alerts required. And so it requires the system has to convince these people that they can share their proprietary or military sensitive data into the system for the analysis routine, but not having it shared outside of that. And if someone in a conflict decides that we will stop sharing any of this, precise data, then they just switch back to being one of the non-cooperative entities that are being where their objects are being tracked by as they are now with as monitored with the radars and the optical telescopes and things like that. So it's trying to build some level of confidence to share the even more precise data, and without sharing your precise information. So it'll be a test to see if you can convince the U.S. military to share their orbits of their spy satellites and things like that, and trust that the system is not using or sharing the data, but is actually just using an algorithm to check about collision alerts.
And just a last point, the sensors and SSA service providers are they are the ones that actually are more interested into doing the business, right? So if we were to suggest this framework tomorrow, they would all be on board. But the people that you cannot get on board are maybe the military, the operators that don't want to share some of their data, but those business, they make money out of telling you, hey, your satellite is there. So we cannot see a case where you couldn't trust the service provider, because it would lose credibility with respect to its clients at the end, as their business.
Oh, no, it's phone. It was working. Hello. Back into the political point of view, I think space debris is a serious problem. But I think there isn't any international agency dedicated to control and regulate the launch of objects in space. Do you know if there is any effort to create a agency like that?
Well, all our policy studies that we made, it points to a very hard way to go for a central international body, because each country would have to give up of their sovereignty on the space to that centralized body. So yeah, many studies goes pointing at this option, but perhaps in the past 10 years ago it was more promising, but especially now, after all the international conflicts that we are seeing, it's becoming more and more difficult for countries now to give up of their position to a centralized body, international body that can say, oh, you maneuver a satellite, you there, maneuver there. So we identified that any solution that is based on a centralized international center, it will fail. Okay.
And the other thing is the space debris issue itself is really relevant, and I wouldn't be too concerned just about the launching part, because normally when they are launching, they see a business opportunity, they want to make money out of it, so they don't want their satellite to become debris. And if they are willing to follow the guidelines, we are sort of on the right path. What is more concerning are, for example, the anti-satellite tests. So still, like a few weeks, a couple months ago, maybe, I was at a conference in New York, which was for the Space World for Foundation, Secure World Foundation. And there are still countries that are not willing to sign a document that says we will not perform anti-satellite tests. And that is a big concern, because they keep happening. And I've been working as an operator, and I know how painful it can be when you wake up one morning and there's an anti-satellite test, and then you need to increase the number of maneuvers of a level next, and then they are going to be there for quite a while. So I would say if we manage to at least agree as world population that anti-satellite is not going to be good for anyone, that would be already a good step. Then if people are launching for business purposes, let's hope they do it following guidelines. Yeah, if it makes sense.
Also, in this international space law area, we have things like the Outer Space Treaty in 1967, and there's very little chance of it's a very difficult process to imagine new space treaties because of the need for consensus among the 100 participants at COPIUS. But there's increasing, UN guidelines and working groups on minimizing space debris. And then it goes into the national governments that are implementing regulations about if you want to launch, you have to follow these guidelines. And so the US has them and other countries have them. And so that's where we may make some progress on making sure that any launch that occurs, they are minimizing the chance of debris generating. One bit of trivia I found when I was studying this is I didn't realize that the Outer Space Treaty's non-interference and pollution of space clauses originated because the Soviet Union was criticizing the US for acting so stupid in space when the US in 1960s launched millions of needles into orbit and just to reflect radio freak waves off of these needles. And so everybody around the world just said, this is a really dumb idea. And so that was so part of the genesis of the Outer Space Treaty. And the only thing the needles did was puncture some the echo balloon, basically. But there's still clumps of needles up there in some of the space debris.
I would like also to add that the scope of the framework that's being proposed for the operational phase of satellites, obviously we had just 150 hours to develop the team project. So the other phases, they are not the final report approach. They going to be as recommendations for future further studies. And what I was going to say it, Eric said, it's, for example, for the launching phase, for example, we have some national regulations, and for example, the US that you have to assess the 3 hours after launch, for launching COLA maneuvers, right? So, but they are still national implementations, right? They are not, but they are out of the scope of this framework. That I was going to say.
So do we have a national law?
Yes, yes. For this subject, Brazil doesn't have a national law in this subject. Right, so thank you very much for your presence here tonight. For us, it's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to show the work the participants are performing. So thank you very much.
Yes, and remember their final presentation will be on the 24th at 1 p.m.
Let's change the slide to show. Actually, yes. This is the final presentation. Please, you are all invited.
Thank you. Thank you. We didn't know the hour.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, this is. Yeah.